Well, Dan and George, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, just it's glad to be with you, and love sharing information with your audience.
Yeah, glad to be a part of it, and look forward to visiting with your audience.
Well, I think to begin with, let's just start with the pendulum dowsing, just to give people a bit of background on what that is. I should say as well that, Dan, you've been on the show before, a couple of years back now. So, Dan, do you want to start with that question?
Pendulum dowsing is just a psychic technique, and a pendulum is just a pendulum. It's a rock on a string, a weight on a string. Now you'll hold it up. What happens is the pendulum, your conscious mind focuses on the pendulum. That frees up your subconscious mind to contact God, the universe, the Akashic records, in our case, spirits and UFOs and UFO inhabitants and highly evolved spiritual beings. And basically you ask a question and you get a yes or no answer. And when the pendulum swings to the right, that's a yes. When the pendulum swings to the left, that's a no. And if it goes back and forth, that's either rephrase the question or I won't tell you. You get that sometimes. But it's a great way to do psychic research. And one of the benefits of pendulum dowsing and the work George and I are doing is that unlike normal medium contact with the spirits, with pendulum dowsing, you can engage in extended conversations. Like George and I have had conversations with spirits for 10, 20, 30 minutes sometimes, because you're more dealing with a spirit to spirit level on that. The spirits have the ability to not get tired if you want to use that terminology. You're able to carry on much longer conversations, which means you can do legitimate research with the spirits.
Okay. So Dan, that's your background in a sense. I mean, that's some of your background there, which is that's some of the work that you've been doing. But if you want to, if there's anything more you might want to add there to your backgrounds, just so that we got a bit of a better understanding for. Well,
just in my books, I've written a number of books on the psychic world, and I always describe myself as a psychic on training wheels. I came to this rather late in life, but for roughly the last 20 years, I've been doing pendulum dowsing. I've done a lot of work looking for missing persons, some criminal work. That led to, in the last, say, 5 years, experimenting with making contact with the spirit world. And by golly, you can do it. You can use the pendulum to talk to spirits. And then through George, discovered, well, you can talk to inhabitants of UFOs. So it's been quite an evolution.
Did you know that you could do that beforehand? I mean, if I mentioned that in the last interview, do you think that's something you would have said?
I never would have thought that little old Dan, blue collar kid from the oil patch in Louisiana, would be addressing an audience overseas about a psychic phenomena. That never occurred to me. It happened late in life, and the thing has just evolved, and it keeps evolving. I'm happy to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll link all your books below in the description below. Your books are coming up on the screen as well. And
God bless you.
With your connection with George, and we'll get to George in just a second. But what is your connection with George then?
Oh Lord, George and I go back. We've been best buddies since probably 1975. We go way back.
Okay. So in any of your other books, was George involved in those books? But he is involved in the Paranormal Pendulum 3, correct?
Yeah, well, actually, George was heavily involved in the Paranormal Pendulum, Dowsing the Deceased, extremely involved in the follow-up book to that, Paranormal Pendulum 2, What the Spirits Say. And then through George's contact, we ended up with the Paranormal Pendulum 3, the Lindsey Higgins story. So we've been doing this together for several years. And George has become quite a proficient pendulum dowser along the way.
Interesting. Okay. Well, George, we'll just get you just to give yourself a bit of a background on yourself as well, if that's okay.
Well, first off, I've had a lifelong interest in things spiritual and always been fascinated with astronomy, outer space exploration. So, I mean, from day one, this had my attention, and it's never really left me. Vocationally, I had an opportunity to be trained as a counselor, the master's in counselor, and as an administrator at a treatment facility, which gave me some really good skills in talking to people, relating to people. And later, when I was able to interview people who had had UFO encounters, and often Dan was with me when those back in the 80s and 90s, we were able to learn that most of what they wanted was just somebody to talk to, somebody to listen. At that time, who could you take your story to? You couldn't, family members probably aren't going to listen. The authorities aren't going to listen. Chances are your pastor's really not going to pay much attention. And these people were really desperate to find somebody who had a knowledgeable ear and was non-judgmental. And that provided a lot of relief for these people. So this really got my attention that might want to focus a little more in this genre. Maybe there's something I can contribute.
Interesting. And, okay, so would you class yourself as a dowser as well? I guess you would.
Johnny come lately, only because of my recent association with Dan in these projects. Previously, no, I had no dowsing skill.
Okay. With yourself then, having done this book, you know, when you look back on it, do you think that the whole idea of dowsing is maybe just as strong as having use some other modality? Because what the story we're going to get into, you could have used hypnosis. This person could have used hypnosis to go back and try to figure out what happened to her. That could have gone to a number of different methods. Do you know what I mean? I guess you can't always say hypnosis is the most accurate, right? But it tends to help people to recollect most times.
Well, in this particular case, Lindsey Higgins was the name of the lady. We made an offer that we could use hypnosis if she would be comfortable with it. Dan is trained and certified as a hypnotist, and she was not comfortable with that, so we didn't go there.
Okay, but you found when looking back now that using the pendulum was just as powerful.
Very much.
Yeah,
so.
let me drop in on that. Yeah, one of the benefits about the pendulum dowsing as opposed to other techniques, which before I did learned the pendulum. Yeah, I explored gazing at a crystal ball. I played with tarot cards, but the other techniques require interpretation, and that depends on, that can be affected by so many different aspects of your life. The benefit of the pendulum dowsing is you get yes or no answers. There's no room for interpretation. You can be wrong like you can with anything else, but you don't have to interpret anything.
No, that's right. Absolutely. So, and you've used it as well you've even used it for missing people, I believe, from our last conversation.
Yeah, I spent the last 20 years looking for primarily missing kids, but a lot of missing adults, and some criminal work. But it's, let me say, any psychic can't claim to be 100% accurate. So, you have off days and you have on days. And it's like that with pendulum dowsing. I have been thousands of miles off, and I have been within feet of locating the actual person.
Right, absolutely. And then I'm just thinking as you're kind of describing how you've used it, and I think I remember last time you sort of went over just the workings of it a bit as well. Just what is it tuning into? Do you think? Is there a greater part of you that it's working with, do you feel, or?
Well, you're definitely, there's your subconscious mind is definitely working with your higher self, and your higher self is definitely working with whatever else is out there. And you can put whatever kind of label you want to as to what else is out there. I think there are a lot of different things out there. Again, you call it God, the Akashic records, but there are also spirits out there. There are higher evolved beings out there. We've been able to communicate with the inhabitants of UFO craft. I think a lot of that involves telepathy with the dowsing, but it's a very effective tool and dependable.
Yes, it is, and I think a lot of people listening to this would have had some experience where, it's been accurate for them as well.
In fact, let me interject here, Kevin. We're currently doing research for Paranormal Pendulum Book 4, And at a recent session I had over here at the house in Bossier City, Louisiana, we have two evidential mediums who are really clocked in. I mean, they are on top of the subject matter that we're researching. And also at the table is the husband of one of the mediums, who is an accomplished pendulum dowser. That's Dave. And he's holding the pendulum while these two mediums are reporting what they are perceiving. And essentially, the pendulum is saying, yes, what they are describing is accurate.
Well, let me toss in something on that. One of the things George and I do is try to double check ourselves as much as possible, because in any given moment you can be right or wrong. So we try to double check ourselves. And several times we have brought out our pendulums, set back to back, so that neither one of us, could see the other, be influenced by the other's motion. We've also had a medium with us who sat where she couldn't see either one of us, so neither one of us, the three of us, could be influenced by the others. And we would go through a 10 or 20 minute session, and every time the three of us would come up with the same answers.
Yeah. I know, right?
So that gives it a lot of credibility.
It does. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it does. So let's just move on now to the Lindsey Higgins story. Just tell the audience who she was, how she got in contact with you, and just to the very beginning part of it, just to guide us into the story.
Yeah, it was back in the fall of 2017. I got a call one night out of the blue. I didn't recognize the telephone number, but I was still involved with my late wife's estate at the time, so I answered the phone just in case it was somehow related to that. And it was, hello, is this George Sewell? Yes. This is Lindsey Higgins. Joe Beth Baggett, a mutual friend, as it turned out, said I should talk to you. Oh, and what should we talk about? And so for the next 2 hours, I got the life story of Lindsey Higgins. It turned out that the mutual friend was aware that I had interest with the Mutual UFO Society and had studied this particular field, and she was privy to some of Lindsey's experiences, and Lindsey was wanting to come out with it. She's been sitting on this for 40 some odd years, and it was tearing her up. And that's when Joe Beth said, why don't you call George? I know he'll listen. And so that's what got it started. And what Lindsey did to get her story out was basically she responded to some information that she got onto a radio program she was listening, that there was a Hollywood company that was looking for people who had lifelong experiences with the paranormal. And so she wrote up her history, sent it out to Hollywood. Within 24 hours, the producers are calling her back, verifying that, yes, this is her story, and they book it. They want to do it as part of a Netflix series that was called Haunted, first season, episode 5. And Lindsey, of course, mentioned me in her conversations with them. So they contacted me to get my impressions of Lindsey and some of the information I have in my background and how it would apply to what she's describing. And they decided, well, you need to come out here too and be a part of it. So that was the first time I actually met Lindsey, was in California when they were shooting this particular episode. And from that, I got acquainted with her husband, and he was kind of perplexed with some of this too. They fairly recently married. And I said, well, we can look into this. And I know just a guy who's got just a tool. Well, we might be able to find out what's going on with Lindsey Higgins. And that's when I approached Dan and said, hey, Dan, I think we got a project for the Pendulum.
Okay, and of course this eventually led into the book as well that you guys did together, which again we're putting up on the screen and linking in the description. So, what was her story then? What has she experienced that got you so interested in what she had to say?
There was so much that came out. Basically, as a child, Lindsey was always complaining of some sort of abdominal pains, and nobody could figure out what they were. She went to several days in the hospital. I did every diagnostic test they could, and there was absolutely no medical explanation for her discomfort. And that what she began to realize, and she started seeing images and having very interesting dreams through the years. And she had memories of actual events where she was approached by ET, if you will, these beings, and physically taken away and was subject to what she would describe as medical experiments or procedures. It turns out it may have been something a little different, but it was a very terrifying experience. And she describes that terror very much so in that Netflix series. So, and it had been continuing pretty much most of her life. It stopped for a while in her teens, but then it fired up again when she was back in college. And she just reached a point, I can't sit on this. And I'm happy to say that apparently working with me and Dan for 2 years in the research for this book, she got a lot of the information out and seemed to have a great deal of relief. And in particular, we learned that it was possible for her to make a request that if these events are going to occur, that they no longer involve any kind of pain or discomfort. And since that time, she has, the few times I followed up with her, she has not related any pain or discomfort associated with any kind of experience.
When she contacted you, were these experiences still taking place? Are they still taking place now, these abduction experiences, as far as she's aware of?
At the time, they were still continuing. And that's why she was getting to the point where I got to do something about this.
Okay. And did you ever get to interview any of her family members? Do they recall what she was, went through as a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a wrong question?
No. I'll pass this to Dan, but we had extensive conversations with her aunt, who grew up, or whose house was beside the house where Lindsey grew up in. Now we had to use the pendulum to talk to her aunt, but her aunt had a lot to say.
Yeah, and beyond that, this, what we thought we were getting into a fairly typical UFO abduction story. And by the time we got through with it, we were dealing with the spirit world, with higher evolved beings, and a lot of reincarnation. And when George says we talked to the family, we talked to our current family, a lot of family members, and we also had conversations with her family from the 1880s.
Is this all through the pendulum?
This is all through the pendulum.
But did you have real in-person discussions with the family members that were surviving? I mean,
let me give an example. Yeah. Let me give you an example, Kevin. There was one particular session where Dan and I were working with Lindsey with the pendulum, and what Lindsey was wanting to do was communicate with her previous self as Sally Murph Woodworth, who was living in the late 19th century, early 20th century, in the same family relationship that she has now with the same father and her same sister. So those three came over immediately in the same family unit. And at this session, Lindsey was able to carry on a conversation with her own spirit self as Sally Murph. And that's what the pendulum was able to do.
And how did you know about any of that past life stuff? Where did that initial information come from?
Part of it came from research, again, involving the pendulum. George and I did a kind of on-the-spot interview at a location, and we interviewed a spirit. We were just killing time for, we had some work to do that afternoon. And that morning, we were just killing time. So we said, well, let's have an interview, see if anybody shows up. Then a spirit showed up, and we had a brief chit-chat. And then we said, well, we're going to go to the cemetery, the old cemetery in town later this afternoon. Could we do you the honor visiting your gravesite? Got a shirt? Yeah, show up. So we showed up and met the spirit, went to what we thought was his gravesite. It turned out to be someone else's gravesite. I don't remember the name, but basically he handed us off, and then this spirit directed us through the cemetery. Now, this is the old Oakland cemetery. It goes back, a couple hundred years. And this spirit directed us through using the pendulum dowsing techniques to a specific grave family plot, and it was the plot of the W.D. Woodworth family. And it was W.D., his family, and his daughter, Sally Murph. And through a lot of research, it turns out that we were directed to the Woodworth family, who is currently reincarnated in the Fertitta family with Lindsey.
Right. Okay. And that connection to what Lindsey was experiencing with the abductions, was there a reason why that lineage came into this experience?
Lindsey wanted to know if she, as Sally Murph at that time, was she having the same kind of interactions?
Okay.
And yes, there were.
You know, that's
it's a generational thing.
You know, but yeah, look how many researchers have looked into that aspect of it nowadays, where they talk about, don't they? You know, the generational thing. You know, these beings, these whatever they are, right? There's an interest in the whole lineage for some reason. So, I mean, you've come across that, have you, with other cases? You know, you've heard of that before, yeah?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Kevin, through the course of this 2 years, I think it's a 2-year process of investigating, we were able to learn that 6,000 years ago, Lindsey in the spirit plane was approached by the being that we were calling ET to participate in a long-term process that would benefit Homo sapiens as well as other species. And Lindsey agreed, sure, fine, hey, sign me up. So this is something that's been going on with her for a long, long time. It was something she agreed to. And frankly, once Lindsey realized that, oh, I agreed to participate in this, well, okay, if I said I would, I will. Let's just make it not painful.
Right. I mean, when we talk about a story like this, where there's a lineage that goes that far back, right? I mean, we use the word ET, don't we? Or or a nuts and bolts kind of craft, but this may not be any of that, right? The whole understanding of what this whole UFO phenomena is, it may be so out there compared to what we can perceive it to be understood as, that we just understand it as this. Does that make sense? Can you...
Hugely. In fact, Dan, you want to describe when I asked ET to present himself to you and Lauren?
Yeah, one thing we learned, again, George and I are still learning. We're still investigating. But one of the things we learned is kind of ties into what you just said there about the ETs, for lack of a better term. But they're basically energy, and in their dimension or their plane, they are able to take on whatever shape is appropriate. And they appear to us as, for example, in our case, Nordics, because that's what we're comfortable with. You run into a blonde, blue-haired, handsome guy and gal, you're not going to be that nervous about them. So, they're basically shape-shifting to something that doesn't scare the hell out of us. The experience George is talking about, we were doing research in a park. Excuse me. I have turned my phone off. We were doing research in a park, and we had George and I were doing our pendulum dowsing. We had a medium with us, and then her husband's also Dave is also a dowser, and we encountered we call it ET, but that's just the name. It's not a description. We encountered a higher evolved being, and both Lauren and I, the medium, and I felt something was going on. She felt like there's like a beautiful purple something has descended upon us. And we were sitting in a semicircle, and I was sitting next to Lauren. And I looked over to Lauren and said, "Do you feel that?" She said, Yeah, I feel that. And both of us at the same time were feeling an enormous and sudden expression of what she later described as mother love. And it was something that it's not something you can fake. I mean, when a powerful emotion comes over you, all of a sudden, it's real. You're dealing with something real. And we both felt it at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't much words to say to you really because, we're discussing something here that's so far out of perception of understanding, you
It's
know.
beyond far out.
Yeah, it's beyond far out.
Yeah, we started far out.
Yeah, we started,
Yeah.
and it's amazing that you've done all this.
George and I are using a term that we're exploring the other side of everything.
Right, right, and it's amazing that you were able to use dowsing to be able to, go down this road and sort of put the clues together in a sense. So. And I know some people may watch this and think, well, how could, is it reliable, blah blah blah. But this is your journey, and this is what it's always worked for you. And there's a lot of power in dowsing, and it takes a bit to understand it and to use it as well, to practice with it, just to see what it's capable of doing.
Yeah, we have a check on that too, by the way, Kevin. This fellow David that we both mentioned, who's a very accomplished pendulum dowser. We would have Dave join Dan and I after Dan and I have had a session, and we would ask Dave the same questions that we asked. Of course, Dave is cold to this. He does not know the responses that we got. And to a point, he would get the same response that we got to the question.
Wow.
So that was a good check and balance for much of the information.
I like that. That's amazing. So, was there any sort of message for humanity? Was there anything that came through as to, was there any, interesting messages when you look back that were like an aha moment in a sense?
Not specifically.
No.
Dan and I were being very focused on the Lindsey story because this thing could have gone so many ways and we would still be writing the book. So we stayed really focused on Lindsey's story. Now, there were some other occurrences to both of us during this 2-year process that also are in the book because they kind of came out of left field, but it was still part of that whole process.
And what's interesting as well, if this is happening to Lindsey, how many other people who never have this experience, of meeting someone like yourselves who just, let it go to the side and just carry on with life, or are just too afraid to look at this subject if it's happening to them. How many other people does this happen to throughout the world? I'm sure that it's more than we would understand or be prepared to accept.
Well, yeah, that's one of the motivations for writing the book. It's certainly one of the motivations for Lindsey to come out is to tell people, you're not alone. This is happening, and not only is it happening, it is happening to a lot of people all over the world. They're having the same experience you are, and it's okay to tell people about that. In fact, you should tell people about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the whole arena is so much different now than it was back in the 1990s. The fact that we're having this conversation right now is a prime example of how much easier it is for people to acknowledge what they are experiencing and to appreciate what others may be experiencing. So that breadth, that broadness that we now have in the conversation is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought, right, that we were able to do this? And it's incredible, and we take it for granted, don't we? But there was a very different time that this wasn't possible, and maybe the only shows that could talk about it, were there just to not support it, but to, it was just something to have on and a light entertainment, wasn't it? So, but there's definitely something to this. So, what was the biggest reason she was having this experience? What were they doing this for? Are they trying to evolve themselves? If she's part of their soul lineage, what was the main reason, if you could sum it up to your understanding of why this is still taking place?
Closest thing we came to, because we didn't really focus a whole lot on that aspect of it, because that would have taken us away from focusing on Lindsey's experience. But the purpose of this long-term project apparently had two purposes. One was to reach a point to where the typical lifespan of a Homo sapien is 150 years, and to greatly awaken the sixth sense. So there would be greater communication between Homo sapiens and the spirit world. So they would be just like so many primitive societies. I mean, they're yakking and shacking and just having a great time with their ancestors as if they're alive and present now, because they are. They're just in a different place. So that seemed to be the two elements that were connected to this particular project.
Now, did she have any sort of like visible marks on her as well?
Very much so. Yeah, so Lindsey had all the classic symptoms. She would have the marks, and they would tend to go away through the course of the day. But where'd that come from? So that's what got my attention after the first phone call. So much of what she described. I've talked to other people who had almost identical experiences. I've certainly read of similar cases. In fact, I gave Lindsey one of my notebooks where I redacted personal information, but it was about a dozen cases that were from people in a different place, different time, that they described almost exactly what Lindsey was experiencing. And she was, whoa, okay, so I'm really not alone in this. No, not by any means, Lindsey.
No, absolutely. So how is Lindsey nowadays, and now that you've been working with her up, and maybe healed some of the issues that she was experiencing with it, some of the trauma? How is she now compared to what she was suffering from before?
Well, we're not that close to Lindsey now, because she and her husband going on there living a very happy, wonderful, and a very comfortable life. Chat with them from time to time, but no, they're doing great.
We really didn't play the role of counselor. We're really just chroniclers of her story.
Okay. I just wondered that over time, since he was able to help her figure out what potentially might be going on here, whether that helped her in...
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think just the fact that a couple of people who were apparently intelligent were interested in not only hearing her story, but hearing the whole story. I think that alone helped out a lot. Somebody believes me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what did it do for your perspective, for both of you? Because, it must have changed you both in some respects that you could even do this.
Yeah, well, like I said, coming from my background, communicating with spirits and certainly communicating with the inhabitants of the UFOs was way out there. And I think the only real change, at least for me personally, is it's now pretty much matter of fact. Like, oh, you talk with dead people? Yeah, mm-hmm. Do it all the time. You speak with people in UFO? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
The way I've described it when asked this similar question is kind of went into this with all of the intellectual understanding and came out of it with visceral understanding.
Right. Yeah, right. Have you...
Yeah, there's a significant difference.
Yeah, absolutely there is. Have you tried to communicate with anything else that was on that sort of intelligence level as that the experience that Lindsey was having? Have you tried to communicate to anything else out there that may be of similar intelligence? Yeah,
right now we're conducting a lot of heavy research into our next book, and we're doing personally out here in the West. I'm in the middle of cliff dweller country, so I'm doing a lot of travel to the cliff dwellings, sacred places, petroglyph panels, kivas, and doing a lot of personal research into talking to the spirits who are there. And asking them, did people come down from the sky? Did they come down in these strange kind of crafts? Did you communicate with them? Did you go up in the air with them? That sort of thing. And that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And I'm in mound builder country, so I'm going to various villages like Poverty Point over in East Louisiana, and some other sites local in the Shreveport-Bossier area, where we're learning that there were villages back 1,000, 4,000 years ago, and we are having pendulum sessions and communicating with those inhabitants at those sites. Principally around the theme was their interaction with what they called, in their legends, sky people. Yes, indeed. And just getting more information about what that relationship was like. And a lot of it's very surprising, very positive, as it turns out, but very surprising. It's going to be an interesting read.
That is fascinating. Yeah, I always remember reading the Seth books, and I know I mention it a lot on this show, right? and it's not the only, books on this subject out there, but the Seth material did talk about just how how this is so far out of our reality, what this really is. You know, are the crafts even conscious in a sense? Do you know what I mean? Are the crafts conscious? Are they just as much as maybe the occupants are? Right? We call it a craft. I mean, that's just a word for it. Are they sort of coming through like a portal rather than any other? From far distances. I mean,
now that you bring it up,
right? Okay.
well, the area where Lindsey grew up, according to the research that George and I did on location, is the site of a portal where crafts would come
It's
in.
also very, very ancient.
We discovered
land.
the portal.
Also, the property itself, according to geologists, it's very old land, and it was occupied by Caddo Indians for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. So there's a lot going on at that particular location. In addition to what we just learned was that there's a portal there, and that's where there was comings and goings, and that's what Lindsey was seeing as a child growing up.
And one of the interesting things about that portal, one of many apparently, but that portal there existed before the Earth existed. So it's been there for basically forever. And then apparently there are other portals that the inhabitants have manufactured themselves.
Yeah. And when I think of a portal, I think, if you've thought of a craft going through it, it would literally just it would be folding itself in time and space, wouldn't it? You'd see something go across the sky, and then it would just disappear into that portal, I guess. And to think that there's that soul lineage, it's also, and they're trying to improve them. Well, fix something up, they will improve them, or maybe that it's just little hints, just where they're trying to work with their soul lineage, right? And I guess we've got the free will, but maybe there's some deeper connection where our improvement in this moment now is also their improvement in some way that we can't fathom. Maybe.
I had an interesting comment from I was interviewing a shaman out here at one of the Kiva sites, and was talking about what did you do when the sky people came down? And I asked them, were they involved in healing with your people? I got a yes, but then I also got some of the inhabitants, Native Americans out here, were also involved in a healing process with the Nordics.
Wow, yeah.
So there was maybe a two-way street going on there.
Absolutely. And it just makes you think as well, like, how many are out there that we can't see with our visible, eyes, and it's, just how much traffic is out there. And but I guess, if they really wanted to show themselves, they would do. We've got a lot of our own spiritual growing up to do first before I think we're ready to see more.
As part of this process, Kevin, they have been showing up literally in photographs. In fact, the park that Dan mentioned earlier, it's Mike Wood Park in Bossier City, Louisiana. It's adjacent to Barksdale Air Force Base at the south end of the main runway. And for years, when I take my morning walk, I walk from my house down there and whatnot, I would, at a certain point facing due east, I would just take a picture of the trees in the sky, and noticed in one of the pictures there was a sphere, an orb hovering above the ground. I said, well, that's maybe a lens flare or something. Continued taking the same photograph in the same position each time I would go to the park, and invariably there would be a sphere in the photograph. And after about 4 or 5 pictures like this, I sent them out to Dan and said, look, Dan, can you make any sense of this? I don't see the sphere, but it shows up on the picture. And Dan did his pendulum thing, and what he determined was that the orb is a spirit. It's a spirit known to me, but not in this lifetime. So, okay, where'd that come from? So I really haven't done any work on my previous existences or anything like that. I'm more focused on it's a full-time job being me right now.
I get that. Yeah.
But I had the thought, okay, I was given the thought to look for 19th century American actresses. Okay. So I started searching the internet and looking for 19th century American actresses, and one name just keeps popping up, and that's Kate Bateman, out of the Bateman theatrical family, born in Baltimore, 1840. And I took this to one of my medium friends, and boom, hey, here's a picture of this blue sparkly orb. We've got information. This may be the spirit of Kate Bateman. And medium friend just got all over that and said, "Oh, absolutely! And you two are so close." And la da 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 da. I mean, so well, for several years now, when I go down to the park, I'll take a picture, and very frequently there'll be the blue orb show up. Kate just saying, "Hey, how you doing? Still here."
And how, in the work that you're doing as well, do you apply discernment just to make sure that that you're centered, and you're in the best place possible to try to bring when bring this information through, to decode it and to make sure it says it's as correct as it can be for you, right?
That comes down to training. Pendulum dowsing is remarkably easy to pick up. You can master the technique in an hour. I mean, if you can hold a rock on a string, you can dowse. You can do pendulum dowsing. The training and the discipline comes into keeping your mind completely open. You can make physically, you can make the pendulum swing any way you want. So you have to work so that you don't get the answer that you desire or that you're afraid of. You have to keep your mind completely open, and that's just a matter of training and discipline. And after a while, it's like any other skill. You get to know when you're doing it right.
Yes. Okay. And do you offer readings as well, Dan, through the pendulum?
In terms of do I do it for? No, I don't charge for any of the work that I do in that context. No.
No, but people can't sort of contact you to say, I'd love it to have a session with Dan and just to see what comes through on the pendulum. You don't really offer that, do you? I don't think.
I generally don't do one-on-one sessions because my time is valuable. If there's a group of people in the neighborhood that wants to learn how to do pendulum dowsing, I'll come by and teach a course free of charge, or I speak at church groups and civic groups and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. But, okay.
My calling is not to do individual counseling.
Right. Right. Okay.
No, it's an investigative tool.
Investigative tool for yourself. Yep. Okay. Doing this work now for these many years, is there anything that sort of stands out that you could say, well, you know what, it's taught me this about life?
You go first, George. You're the philosopher.
There's a lot more to life than we ever imagined, and it is fun.
Yes, I love that answer.
I couldn't have said that better. It's I don't want to say it's a big universe. It's a lot of universes out there. It's the work we do is extremely serious, and we enjoy the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the books as well. So Paranormal Pendulum 2, that's available in all good bookstores. Obviously, it's available from Amazon as well, which the link will be for in the description below. And you've got many more books, I'm sure, right? That you've got.
Oh, yeah.
This may be the endless series.
I get that. I'm feeling that right now. Yeah, this is. Yeah, but it's just. That's a really very interesting story. Yeah. And there's so many other stories like Lindsey's, isn't there? And as you mentioned as well, this is available on a Netflix season. So I will link that particular show in the description as well for Netflix. Yeah, this is very fascinating. Very fascinating. I had no idea, Dan, that your work had gone into this direction, right? So
we did not expect it to go this way, but you follow the path.
Yeah, well, when I was getting you back on, I was like, well, I've got some questions that that were sent through to me, but obviously, I didn't make too much sense. And having you on now, I'm like, oh my gosh, so this is what has happened. So bloody fascinating, and I'm sure there's going to be other UFO cases, and it's a very interesting time for it. Now, do you think there's a reason for timing as well? Because of the times that we live in right now, there's lots of things going on in the world, isn't there? Do you find there's a timing to the work that you're doing as well, maybe? Or do you not look at it like that?
I would definitely look at it like that. I mean, all of this has come together in such a fashion that I started questioning it. As a matter of fact,
a perfect example. I started writing a book on dowsing the deceased. I'm in Arizona. I do all my research in Louisiana. Somebody was somebody. I think Kate was behind that, but somebody was pulling the strings there.
I mean, you couldn't make that up.
That's got to be for a purpose.
Yeah, you could not make that up. And if people have got their own story of something similar, that they can reach out to you as well. If they've got something that they feel that may be of interest to you.
Sure.
Okay. Are you not working with do you work with any sort of bodies, like MUFON or anything like that?
I'm affiliated with MUFON, but not an official capacity.
Not an official capacity, yeah. But if you hear of a story, then because I guess you could take this work anywhere. Okay, well, it's going to be interesting to get you back on in the future because just to see where this is taking you. Fascinating stuff.
We'll keep you in the loop.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So, your website, Dan, yours is
www.fournightspress.com. That's FOURKNIGHTS, fournightspress.com, and www.danbaldwin.com.
Okay, that's coming up on the screen. And George, your website is?
I'm real simple, www.georgesewell.com. Be sure you put that middle E in there, otherwise you'll get some artist in New York City. Nice guy, sure, but he's not me.
We'll make sure we put that on the screen, the right spelling as well. Yes, so that's coming up on the screen as well. Is there any final message, guys, that you might want to give?
It's a great big universe out there. You can play a bigger role in it. So why don't you come join the fun?
Never had so much fun in my life. And I've had a lot of fun in my life.
I can tell, yeah. But this is different. This is on a whole different level, absolutely. Yeah. Well, George, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate that and what you're doing as well. And Dan, thank you for coming back on well. Thank you both very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.